Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Tommy D. Duncan III, otherwise known as TD3. It is Wednesday, July 10th, 2024. And if it is Wednesday night, it is Black Men Speak, ladies and gentlemen. I am going solo for right now. My colleague and cohort, Jimmy Stewart, is getting a few things trying to take care of on his laptop, and I'm hoping that we will have him pretty soon. But in the meantime, we will go ahead and start with the show. So I want to thank everyone for joining in tonight. If you have not done so yet, make sure you subscribe to the show. If you enjoy this show, make sure that you share this content with anyone else. And of course, like this show tonight as soon as possible so we can make sure that more folks can see this show. So we want to thank everybody for joining in. And of course, make sure that if you are watching, jump on the chat line, join us. I'm definitely going to want to get your feedback on the stories that we have this evening. And so we are going to have a content-rich show tonight. First, I'm going to, of course, ask that we acknowledge our folks on the chat line. So Miss Audrey K, cousin Audrey, thank you for joining us tonight on the show. And then, of course, our good friend and colleague, Uncle Asar Al-Kabilan. He's a little bit under the weather this evening, but for those of you who have been watching us for a while, you've seen his face. Definitely keep him in your prayers so he will get back to 100% soon. Looks like we have Miss Tanya Hall on the line this evening and also have Miss Marion Square. So thank you for joining us. And I know these folks who have a mouthpiece and some vocal cords to bring it to the people. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started with the show. Of course, we're going to start out with our birthday babies for this week. And today is July the 10th. So we are going to start out with our first birthday babies. Now, for those of you who do enjoy the movies, you might know this face. Not an old school guy, but extremely talented. Chiwetel Ejiofor. He is actually a British actor, even though you would not know it by some of the movies that he's been in. But he is the recipient of various accolades, including a British Academy Film Award and the Laurence Olivier Award, with nominations for an Academy, 2 Primetime Emmys, and 5 Golden Globe Awards. He played in leading roles in 12 Years a Slave, Doctor Strange, and Multiverse of Madness. He's also received Academy Award and Golden Globe nominations for 12 Years a Stage, along with a BAFTA Award for Best Actor. He was nominated for a 2014 Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor for his role in Dancing on the Edge. And in 2022, he played the role in the Showtime's, that is the wrong one, gives you an idea who's going to be next. Nominated in 2014 for a Primetime Emmy, and in 2022, he played the lead role in the Showtime series, The Man Who Fell on Earth. So for anyone who has Chiwetel in your Rolodex, make sure that you give him a holler. All right, next, we're going to have one of the most known faces in entertainment for literally the last half century, the Cos. His birthday is actually on July the 12th, so coming up in a couple of days on Friday. Of course, this actor, comedian, and personality extraordinaire has entertained not just America, but the world for over half a century, but best known for, of course, his role as Heathcliff Huxtable on the sitcom series The Cosby Show, which ran from 1984 to 1992. He released several stand-up comedy albums and was a popular spokesperson in advertising for decades. Also well known in the U.S. for his personality and gained reputation as America's dad, of course, with his role on The Cosby Show. He began his career, however, as a stand-up comic at a nightclub in San Francisco in 1961, primarily performing observational comedy in a conversational style. He released several stand-up specials, starting with Bill Cosby is a funny fellow, right? in 1963 and starred in the comedy film Bill Cosby himself. If you've not seen Bill Cosby himself and you are just a comedy fan, you have got to get to that one on YouTube. Even now, even though that is a dated series, it is extremely funny. He also still holds the record for earning the most Grammy Awards for Best Comedy Album with 7 Grammys. His acting career began, of course, with him starring the role, for those of you who've been around, for the NBC secret agent show I Spy, which ran from 1965 to 1968. He made his film debut starring in Man and Boy in 1971, followed by Hickey and Bogues in 1972, followed by the series with Sidney Poitier, Uptown Saturday Night, Let's Do It Again, and A Piece of the Action in 1977. Those are all-time classics. A couple of my favorite movies of all time, old school. So, folks, that is Bill. If you have him in your Rolodex, wait till July the 12th and make sure that you give him a holler. All right, next on our birthday list, Stan Shaw. You might not know the name, but you will probably know the face. He started his career performing in Broadway musicals Hair and Via Galactica before making his feature film debut appearing in Truck Turner in 1974. He later appeared in movies including Bingo Long and the Traveling All-Stars, and Motor Kings, Rocky, The Great Santino, Fried Green Tomatoes, The Rising Sun, and for those of you who are comedy and film lovers, you have to remember him in, of course, Harlem Nights with Richard Pryor. Of course, Stan's birthday is on July the 14th. Give him a holler if you got him in your Rolodex. And last, but definitely not least, one of my favorites, and quite frankly, probably one of the greatest football players in NFL history, the Barry Sanders. Barry is considered one of the greatest NFL players of all time, playing for the Detroit Lions for 10 straight seasons. He led the NFL in rushing 4 times and in total touchdowns once. During his college career at Oklahoma State and as a junior in 1988, he compiled what is considered to be the greatest individual season by a running back, rushing for 2,628 yards and 37 touchdowns over 11 games, after which he won a Heisman Trophy and was unanimously recognized as an All-American. He was selected in the first round by the Detroit Lions in 1989 and then won Offensive Rookie of the Year. In 1991, he led the Lions to their first postseason win since 1958, and in 1994, he was awarded the NFL Offensive Player of the Year. In 1997, he rushed for over 2,000 yards in a regular season and was co-awarded the NFL MVP with the Green Bay Packers' Brett Favre. He unexpectedly retired, though, at the age of 31 in 1999, just 1,457 yards short of breaking the NFL's rushing record, then held by Walter Payton. He finished his career with 15,269 yards, which is 4th all-time, and he was selected to the Pro Bowl and the All-Pro team every year he played 10 years straight. That is no easy feat. The Lions retired Sanders' number 20 jersey on November the 24th, 2004, and he was inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2004. So on July the 16th, if you got Barry in your Rolodex, make sure that you give him a holler. All right, folks, those are our birthday babies for this week. Of course, we wish all of them a happy birthday with family, friends, and or whatever they do. So let's go ahead and get started with our stories for this week. Let's see if we have anybody else on the chat line. Okay, for those who are on the chat line, I'm going to want to hear from you because I'm going to need my virtual co-hosts to help me out since Jimmy is not here. So we've got some interesting stories that we want to roll across. Now, of course, everybody in the Southeast Texas area has been reeling from Hurricane Beryl, and really that's now kind of gone up through Louisiana and to the northeastern part of the country, but millions, literally millions in Texas, not to forget the Caribbean, who was devastated as well, is heading now into its third sweltering day without power after Hurricane Beryl wreaked havoc throughout several counties in southeast Texas and now through the central part of the country. After downing trees and power lines across the greater Houston area, Hurricane Beryl has been downgraded to, of course, a tropical storm. And power companies have deployed thousands of workers to restore power, while state and local officials navigate residents' frustration at what's becoming routine now in Texas. Massive power outages after winter storms, thunderstorms, tornadoes, and hurricanes. I mean, for those of you who have lived in Texas for at least, 3 or 4 years, of course, you remember the big freeze a couple of years ago, the issues that we were having with the power grid. And, with all the money that we spend in the state of Texas, no major upgrades, Band-Aids at best, have been done to the power grid in Texas, which we operate on a solo power grid. We're not connected to a multi-state or regional power grid like most other states do. To date, Hurricane Beryl has killed at least 10 people, according to state and local authorities. President Joe Biden has approved a federal emergency disaster declaration to aid Texans in the recovery from the hurricane. Once the declaration is finalized and issued, state homeowners and businesses alike will be able to access loans and grants to help with related recovery costs. Now, there are two parts to this, folks. There is Part A to cover the cost of debris removal, while Part B covers emergency protective measures like medical care, transportation, and evacuation. The federal government will be covering most of the cost here, but one thing that you need to be aware of: when electrical power is knocked out after a hurricane, you have to be very careful about the carbon monoxide poisoning. When those power generators are not properly used, there is, of course, an odorless gas that we call the invisible killer. Early symptoms can include headache, dizziness, weakness, and nausea, similar to the flu. So you have to be extremely careful out there. So for those of you who may be in the Southeast Texas area and areas that are impacted by this, and you still don't have power, but you do have a generator, be very careful. And to stay safe, experts recommend never connecting a generator directly to your home's wiring, ensuring it's properly grounded, and always operate it outdoors away from windows and vents. Organizations like the American Red Cross, Salvation Army, and local volunteer organizations can also help with food, shelter, and supplies, as well as even assistance with cleanup efforts. And remember, folks, people cannot receive disaster aid and insurance assistance for the same damages. So insured Texans should file claims through their existing policies before applying to FEMA assistance in that particular order. So just make sure that you're very careful. We definitely want to keep our prayers for those that are impacted by it. I've been checking, my friends and families who've been in the Houston area. A few folks have gotten their power back, but there are still tons of people who are still in a very strained situation because of the power outage, damages, of course, trees that have fallen, lost and spoiled food over the last couple of days. So we want to make sure that we continue to give our prayers and our support and our help to folks that have been impacted by this hurricane and or tropical storm. Anybody out there on the chat line, for those of you on the chat line who have been impacted or have loved ones who maybe have been impacted by the tropical storm, formerly hurricane. Let's hear from you on the chat line. Any thoughts, any prayers, any shout outs, any recommendations or thoughts that you have out there. I don't know if we have anybody who works with FEMA. I have a good friend that works with FEMA. So let me hear on the chat line if anybody has any folks who are out there that we need to be aware of. All right, folks, let's go ahead and keep things moving. to our next story. Keeping up with stories that we have been tracking over the last year, one of the things that we do is, we not just cover local or national, but international stories. And, one story that we have been keeping an eye on in the West African region, of course, are the West African states of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, who, for those of you who may have been keeping an eye on this, have just created an alliance for security and or sovereignty of their countries. So within the last week, in a historic address, Captain Ibrahim Traore, who is the president, military, mind you, but president of Burkina Faso, delivered a powerful speech at the first summit of the Alliance of Sahel States, what they call AES. The summit was focused on unity, economic cooperation, regional security, and stability across the continent. The first summit included Burkina Faso's Captain Traore, Mali's Colonel Assimi Goïta, and Niger's, I'm going to try to get this right, Abdurrahmane Tiani, denouncing the pretense of the so-called independence granted to African countries in the late 50s and early 60s by so-called European colonizers, followed by the plundering of natural resources and terrorism against Africans by those same so-called European liberators. The heads of states are focused on true independence for their country, sovereignty for those people, and a people-ruled country where the heads of state are not controlled and determined by their former colonizers, but by the people of the country. The president of Mali, Colonel Assimi Goïta, highlighted the synergy between the militaries of the three countries in a hunt for armed terrorist groups. Colonel Goïta of Mali also announced the implementation of strategies in the areas of transportation, economics, communications, infrastructure, culture, and mining sectors that would benefit the people, not their former colonizers. And the president of Niger, General Tiani, spoke on the fierce determination of the heads of state to regain sovereignty of their countries. Particular emphasis, of course, is placed on food security and economic independence. So, again, this is a story that Jimmy and I have been tracking for a while, really for the last couple of years. And, the challenge of it for most of you who are been keeping, of course, up with the history of the liberation, so-called, of most of the African countries started in the late 50s and rolling into the 60s. Really it was more of a transition from traditional colonization of African states by Europe to what we call now neo-colonialism. All that being said is that their former colonizers, in essence, maintained control politically and economically of the wealth and resources of African countries. If there were certain folks who were identified by the people to run the state, they would just change that. Just like we've talked about what's happened in the country of Haiti, which we'll talk about a little bit later on tonight's show. But with all that being said, what these three countries have courageously done, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, they have created an alliance between their three countries, or what some people commonly call their three states, in order to provide military protection, strategic alliances, and really to take back the wealth and the sovereignty of their country. Now, all of these, curiously enough, were formerly colonized by France. Several, of course, other countries that have not formed alliances have been colonized by France, but France by far, considering most of the former European colonizers, was considered really among the most treacherous of the European countries that were colonizing African states. So with that being said, they have a common currency, which is the French currency. Of course, they had a common political foe, which was France, who had colonized them for, of course, several decades. And then they have a common goal, which is to take back their power, take back their sovereignty, and of course, focus on the future of their countries through this alliance. So we definitely, of course, wish them the best of luck. There really is no other country or group of countries in this world that you have seen that have been so racked with political and economic strife than many of the African countries, especially in West Africa, which is where the majority of those who were enslaved in North and South America were taken from, West Africa. All that being said, let me know, give me your shouts out, what's your thoughts on this. If you haven't been keeping up with this, I would highly recommend that you keep up with this story. All right, we have a couple of comments online. Yes, Ms. Tanya, yes, definitely tough for family members in Houston, still without power now for a third day. Not one of them has had power restored just yet. Most, if not all of them, are headed to hotels and are in a hotel, that can become costly. And this is the thing, because some of these hotels know that people have no options, sometimes they jack the prices up on these hotels. So make sure you keep an eye out for some of these brands, and let us know if they're, jacking the prices up. Folks have a tough enough time as it is, and hope that the hotel chains are not taking advantage and or exploiting people when they are in the time of need. So let's definitely keep an eye out, keep our prayers up, do the best that we can to support those who are in need, regardless of what area of the country they are in, that have been impacted by, of course, the hurricane. So with that being said, let's continue to move forward. And also, give me your thoughts on what's happening, if you've been keeping up with this, on what's going on in West Africa as well. These are the three leaders, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, from right to left. And of course, we will continue to keep our eyes on this story and keep you updated. The next story that we're going to talk about, also one we've been tracking since 2021, well, probably a little bit longer than that, the state of affairs in Haiti, which interestingly enough has a very dubious history as it relates to the United States and its growth. So on June the 25th, as what we've talked about before, really a large part of our coverage started when the former president, Jovenel Moïse, was assassinated, murdered in 2021, the former, of course, head of state. And since then, the country has been spiraling downward in terms of violence, especially in the capital, Port-au-Prince. And then, of course, as we've reported over the last year or so, there are literally no constitutional elected officers of any sort. No courts, no Congress, no heads of state that have been elected by the people. So on June the 25th, hundreds of Kenyan police officers landed in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, to participate in what is being considered or called a multinational security mission aimed at combating armed groups and restoring peace, so-called, in the country of Haiti. Funded by the U.S., the United States, to the tune of $300 million, Kenyan police are stationed near the capital's airport. Now, the interesting part about this whole narrative is that, they have been kind of pushing this as a United Nations-backed multinational peacekeeping force. Well, the United Nations did not write a check for this, but the United States did. And I was curious when we started talking about this over the last year, when they started pushing for Kenya to take its police force on the eastern hemisphere of the country to move their paratroopers to the western hemisphere of the country, when the United States Florida in particular is within a couple of hours flight to Haiti. We'll unpack that a little bit more. But armed Haitian paramilitary groups who mainstream mass media calls gangs, and are, by the way, armed primarily by U.S. weapons dealers, now dominate and have control of close to 80% of the capital, Port-au-Prince. Members of Haiti's newly appointed Transitional Council recently marked the third anniversary of the assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse, which, of course, we talked about a couple of years ago. On July the 7th of 2021, Moïse was murdered by a squad of mercenaries who invaded his home, shooting him 12 times while he was in bed asleep until his death, wounding his wife, but somehow not injuring any of his bodyguards that were supposed to be protecting the compound. Yeah, you got that. He was murdered, shot 12 times. None of his bodyguards were injured. To date, 11 men have been arrested and in U.S. custody. Prosecutors have alleged that the conspirators in Haiti and the United States hired the mercenaries to remove Moïse to benefit from contracts from a successor administration. The turbulence in Haiti, of course, since Mr. Moïse was assassinated, has led to over 580,000 Haitians being displaced. Appointed Haitian Prime Minister, and I highlight appointed Haitian Prime Minister Gary Conille, newly appointed and formally employed by the United Nations, recently, of course, expressed gratitude for the intervention. Reinforcements are expected from the Bahamas, Bangladesh, Barbados, Benin, Chad, and Jamaica, expecting the total number of police and military to ultimately reach 2,500 peacekeeping troops, so-called, in the country of Haiti. But this is what I find very interesting, and this is what people need to know if you're doing the research and you're tracking the details. Haiti as a country hasn't had a democratically elected president, otherwise someone that was chosen by the people, when I call democratic, democratic, since Jean-Claude Aristide was elected in the early 2000s. Now, Aristide, in his desire to bring back sovereignty of the country to the people of Haiti, not France, not the United States, not Canada, not other foreign interests, who was seeking to recoup some of the strong arm costs that foreign interests had basically bribed their country and has kept them in, of course, debt pretty much since they won independence from foreign rule by the way of France in 1804. Well, when Mr. Aristide began to ask or really demand that reparations be paid to the country for all of the destruction that foreign interests in the United States, he was, in essence, kidnapped and removed from office. This is a foreign head of state. Removed from office. When I say that, I mean United States military flew to the country of Haiti and literally removed him from office and flew Mr. Aristide, democratically elected by the people of Haiti, and put him on a plane to Africa. I believe East Africa specifically. Now, since that point in time, the United States and France have pretty much determined who was going to be running Haiti from the so-called capital of Port-au-Prince. And so when we talk about a country that believes in freedom, sovereignty, believes in a so-called democracy. They believe that maybe for the United States. But how do you advocate for democracy in a country and don't advocate for democracy in other countries? Haiti has strategic interests to the United States, in particular for military installations. Also, of course, like other countries that foreign interests have their grubby hands in, there are mineral interests and mineral rights that they have an interest that they want unfettered access to. So the story is a little bit complicated. It's not more than just meets the eye. Mainstream media wants us to believe that it's just a bunch of gangs that are pillaging and plundering the country, that are just doing whatever it is that they want to choose to do. But what they don't talk about is the story about how since 1804, when Toussaint Louverture, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, helped free Haiti from its colonizers, the French, that shortly thereafter, they created an economic blockade against the country, forced the Haitians to pay reparations to a country that had literally enslaved all the people of Haiti for years upon years. And so I want to say that the number was somewhere over 40 billion that Haiti was required to pay back to France. Now, imagine this. You fight, you win your freedom. You now have independence. And the country who enslaved you now is forcing you to pay reparations. Well, that's what they did because, when France, supported by the United States, sent its military, it encircled the country and made sure that the Haitians and its new leadership could not export its products, couldn't do business with anyone. And so, in essence, they have been a debtor country since their independence. No one wants to talk about that. Everyone wants to talk about how poor the country is. Everyone wants to talk about how devastated the country is. No one wants to talk about the role that foreign interests have had in keeping Haiti oppressed. All that being said, the question, bear in mind, is why do you send Kenyan forces from one part of the globe to the other part of the world, to the other part of the globe on a so-called peacekeeping mission? Well, the United States, even though they want to put a UN face on it, doesn't really want to send their troops to Haiti to do the work. The United States has done a lot of damage in Haiti, historically speaking. For those of you who may not have kept up with it, the United States actually occupied Haiti for several years, starting around 1915. And they, of course, had military strategic interests in Haiti. And of course, since then, and since they removed their troops, they have made sure that they have had their hand in keeping the country oppressed. All that being said is that there is no country in the world that wants to be run politically or economically by any other country. Every country wants its own sovereignty at the will of its own people. And so our prayer is that even though the United States has used a blackface in order to quell so-called the violence in a black country, an African country, let's not call it black, there is no country called black, but they've used Africans out of Kenya to do the dirty work in another African country called Haiti, because Haiti is an African country, it's just in the Caribbean. The challenge is this. Haiti has not had a democratically elected president since Aristide. And if it's up to the will of certain interests, they'll continue that way. So for those of you who have a will in this, who write your congresspeople, who have a will in the interest of democracy, do the research. Don't believe me. And let it be known that Haitians should be run by Haitians, democratically elected Haitians, for the interest of the people. not the interests of foreign neo-colonizers. So with that being said, we're going to definitely keep our eyes on this and make sure that if no one else calls it out, we do. All right, folks, let's see what we got. Anything new on the chat line? Monsieur Noir, my good friend Seth L. My daughter stated that only McDonald's were open for food services and internet. Oh my God. So I'm hoping that that's just in her neighborhood. I haven't eaten McDonald's food in probably close to at least a decade and a half. My condolences for your daughter, Brother Seth L. If your daughter can only eat at McDonald's, or if that's the only place that is open, because she might be going to the hospital if she eats too much of that McDonald's food. I won't go too deep into that because that's not really the scope of our conversation for this evening. But with that being said, I hope that someplace else opens pretty soon. I'd rather eat a bologna sandwich, and I don't even eat bologna, than McDonald's food. What's going on, Miss Elisa? Cousin Elisa, our resident attorney is on the line. Want to thank her for joining us this evening. Actually, Miss Elisa is in Houston. She actually accepted a new job down there working with the city attorneys in the city of Houston, or is it Houston County? I forgot whether it was Harris County or the city of Houston, but she is in Houston. I know it's bad down there. So let us know what's going on the chat line, and let us know what you're hearing there. And we're definitely going to make sure that we keep tabs on what's going on and support those in the Southeast Texas, or really any area of the region that's been affected by Hurricane Beryl. Okay, so she is an attorney with Harris County, not the city of Houston. All right, next story. As we were talking about Kenya deploying its police department, several hundred of them, by the way, to Haiti to manage the state of affairs in Haiti. At the same time, their president, William Ruto, who, by the way, was the beneficiary of that $300 million that the United States paid Kenya to send its police to the country of Haiti. Well, guess what? I know y'all know this because we've been talking about this, but there are a lot of folks who have problems with his presidency, and they have been pushing for him to step down as president probably close to the last month. President Ruto has recently announced major budget cuts to fill a hole left after withdrawal of his recently proposed finance bill, which generated protests across the country due to major tax hikes on common commodities such as bread, feminine products, fuel, a lot of things that really affect the working class and what we call the working poor in the United States. The country erupted into chaos when these peaceful protests turned into unfortunate violent conflicts where police fired into crowds. Somewhere in the range, I think the last time I checked, 40 people died as a result of the police action against the protesters. Now having faced public calls to resign, Ruto has pulled back on his new finance bill, which, by the way, interestingly enough, came not too long after he met with Joe Biden, and not too long after he got that announcement of that nice $300 million check. Shout out to our sisters in Oklahoma who are still trying to get reparations for, of course, Tulsa being bombed. That's another story. $300 million to Kenyans to go keep Haitians in track. We got $300 million for that. No help for the sisters. Two remaining, 108, 109 years old, in Tulsa, who are still trying to get some relief from the greatest economic enclave, at least if not one, the greatest economic enclave in American history historically, of what we call Black Wall Street. But all that being said, we wrote a $300 million check to William Ruto. He's now under heat to resign. He said he's going to slash 2.7 billion budget deficit by half and borrow the West. He hasn't said where the rest is going to come from in that borrowing. After anger bloated over the bureaucracy and luxurious lifestyles of senior officials in Kenya helped to fuel these protests, Ruto has promised funding cuts in his own office and said funding would stop for the offices of the First Lady and the Second Lady, that is the wife of the Vice President, and the wife of the Prime Cabinet Secretary. I guess they got a lot of offices. Almost 4 dozen state enterprises with overlapping roles will be closed. Ruto has also become deeply unpopular in only his second year as president. In his quest to introduce taxes meant to enable Kenya to pay an $80 billion public debt to the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, commonly known as the IMF, and China. Their public debt makes up about 70% of Kenya's GDP, which in 2022 was about $113 billion. They've got that much debt. How Ruto's administration will find the money to pay off debt without furthering angering millions of Kenyans, already calling for his resignation, and barely getting by without slowing down the economy is the key question here. Their economy grew about 5.6% in 2023. In essence, how this happens for Kenya is their treasury makes budget estimates and force the budget to the Parliamentary Finance Committee, which then creates the finance bill. If it's passed, of course, it's signed by President Ruto, just like it will be signed by the President of the United States for the next budget. Kenyan economists, one of which said that further borrowing by Kenya could be disastrous and proposed a strategy of using diplomacy to attract investment and restructuring of debt in an attempt to get creditors to write off some of that debt. I think I've heard of China doing that. Another economist stated when the government borrows more, interest rates go up, common math. And when interest rates go up, businesses slow down. The economy slows down due to the high cost, of course, of repayment. William Ruto, the president, has advocated for self-sustainability, saying that the country should raise more revenue instead of borrowing. He was trying to do that with taxes. The people weren't having it. If we are a serious state, he says, we must be able to enhance our taxes. The people not having it. While the folks who are in the highest echelons of bureaucracy are living pretty lush lifestyles, and the people are struggling. Kenyans have rejected attempts to raise taxes as they struggle with rising prices on just basic goods. So, folks, this is, again, another situation where you have countries, and by the way, most African countries have only been so-called independent from their former European colonizers, now neo-colonizers, since close to maybe 70 years. The first, of course, being Ghana. I believe that was 1957, give or take. Shout out Kwame Nkrumah. And then, of course, all the dominoes began to fall. However, those neo-colonists who were raping the continent via each country from all of its wealth and its mineral resources, they would take the massive amount of wealth. They would leave crumbs to the president, who usually they chose, and his cronies, and the majority of the people still remain poor, struggling. And again, when you look at the wealth, the opulence of most European countries. So when we go to London, Big Ben, when we go to France, Gay Paris, and we look at all of the beauty and opulence, when we go to Holland, even if we talk about the original perpetrators of chattel slave labor on the African continent, the Portuguese, the Spaniards. When we look at the opulence of those countries, that does not exist without the extraction of wealth, resource, and labor from Africa. Quite frankly, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. Most European countries don't have that much natural resource and wealth at their control. Of course, we don't learn this in our history books. And of course, now with the movement of book bannings, with, of course, the fight against woke, of course, the death of DEI as we know it in the United States, and or let's be quite frank, the destruction of facts for alternative facts or what we call fiction. Most people will never understand the true history of the greatest civilizations of all time. We hear about the opulence and the greatness of the Greeces, of the Romes, of the old European empires, including, of course, France, of course, of what we now call Great Britain. And now we talk about the empire of the United States, but we don't ever talk about the truth about how that wealth and that opulence and that power was acquired. Most of those countries do not have the military. They do not have the wealth. They do not have the economy. Without the mineral wealth and the labor and the extraction and the death to millions and millions of Africans from East Congo to West, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, etc. All that being said, just like what happens in the United States, what happens in the Caribbean, also happens on the continent, divide and conquer. And so they use Africans to do their dirty work now to other Africans. We have to take the scale off of our eyes and understand what we're seeing. We have to do the research and kind of understand, stop focusing on entertainment and understand the history of what's been happening globally and continues to happen, and call a spade a spade. All right, folks. We will, of course, keep our eyes on what's going on and keep you updated with, of course, what is going on the continent as well. And finally, let's see if we got anything on the chat line. Let me see here. Cousin Elisa, fallen trees and yes, good places are closed. Wanted to get some payway Chinese food. Strip was out. A lot of co-workers and friends still without power. All right, folks. So if in anything that, and Elisa, if with what you're seeing with your boots on the ground, not literal boots on the ground, let us know if there's anything that we can do to kind of help support, directly and or indirectly, because I know it is rough for folks who have been going through this. All right, people, we're now going to go to the next story, which, of course, is a continuation of what we started last week, which really started out with the great debate. Not exactly, of course, between the presidential candidates, Joseph Biden and Donald Trump. But now we're going to kind of turn the corner on this, because since then, we know there's been a lot of heat on President Biden to step back, step down for his candidacy for re-election. I find it pretty interesting, and I want to get your thoughts. If you're not on the chat line, jump on the chat line, because I need to get some shout outs. And Brother, so I need to hear from you as well. There has been a swell of heat coming from the Democratic Party for Joe Biden to resign, based upon his performance at the debate, based upon where they see the, of course, polls going. Trump already had the lead going into debate. Now that lead is widened. And so you have folks who are either indirectly and or directly calling on Joe Biden to leave way for someone else to run for president, because they believe that based upon his performance, there is no recovery or not enough recovery to gain ground and possibly win the election, regardless of how some people feel that how flawed former President Trump is as a candidate for whatever reason that happens to be. They don't believe that going with Biden at the top of the Democratic ticket is going to work. So, good point. So, Elisa, who's going to replace him? We'll have that conversation. We got about 8 minutes before we stop this show. So, let me hear your thoughts. Obviously, you have a vice presidential candidate who's credible. There have been a lot of folks who have been saying we need to steer towards Kamala Harris. A lot of the money has been going towards the Biden-Harris ticket. And so the question is, how do you sidestep your vice president, who, by the way, has been making rounds, has been on the streets, getting in front of a lot of folks, of course, fighting the good fight leading up to November. But this is the question. What are your thoughts? I want to hear from you. Should Biden step down, or should he fight the good fight, which is, in essence, what he's been doing? You know, the big money is starting to speak, and they're saying that Biden might need to step aside. What do you say? What say you, crowd? Should Biden have stepped down? I mean, this is a good question. Everything starting in 2023, and we knew this. I mean, we understand that Biden is not a spring chicken. We never said he was a spring chicken. But if the Democratic Party, looking very, very unorganized right now, because unlike the Republican Party, regardless of who they got, they followed in line. They're supporting their candidate. They don't care if he's been impeached twice. They don't care if he's been convicted of 34 counts. They don't care if he's under, if he's lost a civil lawsuit with someone. They fall in line. They support their candidate. The Democrats seem to be all over the place. So I find it interesting that they've had all this time to get organized, knowing who their candidate was. And yes, he had a bad debate. We've already talked about that. But the question is, who's running the party now? Who's the voice of the party? Because if Democrats are now revolting against their own candidate, who they choose, or who they elected to be chosen, what are you going to do? Let's see what we got on the chat line. Now celebrities are calling out, Miss Tanya. Now the celebrities are coming out. George Clooney, yep, saw that, says that he loves Biden, but he thinks he needs to step down. Like you said, the money's talking. Miss Chastity, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining the chat line. Miss Elisa, it's crazy the party is doing this. Brother Seth, it's too late to find another Democratic candidate. So, again, should Biden step down? He has no inclination right now. He says he's in it. He says he's the best candidate. And he says he's not stepping down. Ms. Chastity, Biden should not resign. Okay? Let me have your thoughts on this. Even in spite of the fact that some people are saying that he's going to get slobber knocked in November, I agree too. He needs to stay. Okay, Ms. Chaz says he needs to stay, and Cousin Elisa says he needs to stay. This is what I find very interesting. Okay, here's from Brother Assar. Biden should have never ran for his first term. He was a warmonger and racist. Congressional record proves it. His opponent is a fascist and a racist who should be in jail. So we got two very flawed candidates. You know, I had this conversation with my father. And, you know, I said, you know, Pop, I understand you don't like either candidate. And my father, he's been around for a minute. And a lot of young people are looking at the same thing. We got two guys, both of them are jacked up. Both of them are old as black pepper. 1 foot and 1 foot, 1 foot in and 1 foot out of a proverbial casket. You got two candidates. You got to figure out either one Who's going to most represent your interests? Number two, who's going to do the least damage if you don't like either of them? And that's what I told my dad. You got to figure out who's going to do the least damage based upon what your interests are. We got another quote from Ms. Tanya. The question is, why are they overlooking the Vice President, Kamala Harris, to be the top of the ticket in place of Biden? There are some folks who are now leaning towards Vice President Kamala Harris. My question is, why did they wait so long to deploy Kamala Harris to really partner or be a partner to Joe Biden? I mean, she's been like, everybody was putting these APBs out on Kamala Harris for the last 3.5 years. The Democratic Party, in my opinion, failed to leverage her best capabilities because she is a much better public personality in a public setting than Joe Biden is. Not just because of his age, but she's just got that it factor that he doesn't. Number two, she brings in a woman's perspective that Joe Biden can't. She also represents two demographic groups, African American and Asian, that Joe Biden can't. And the question is, why did they wait so long? They dug a hole for themselves. Okay, we got another comment. They don't have enough time to replace Biden. And so if that's the case, what's the strategy? The polls are widening. I mean, if the Democratic Party wants to win, and there's some folks who, before this even happened, said, you know what, Trump's going to win anyway. So if they want to close the gap, what are they going to do? I mean, this is, I think, mass media loves this kind of stuff. They need eyeballs. And there are eyeballs on this. Got another comment from Brother Assad. This country needs to break the two-party system trap. Start today building several party options. That's interesting. That's going to be a tough sell because we do have multiple parties, but we have two main parties. You have the Green Party. You have multiple smaller parties. And so I guess if you fall out with enough people, maybe some of these other smaller parties, third parties, you get a little bit more strength from. The political system in this country needs a purge, but then does it fall to the Wild Wild West? The party needs to be quiet, okay? Biden could give his delegates to another candidate if he resigns. Yeah, those are facts. And of course, you've got your vice president. Some people have spoken of Gavin Newsom. You know, when there was a lot of talk over this last week, if Kamala Harris were to become the face or the top of the ticket, who would her vice presidential candidate be? I know they've been vetting the governor of North Carolina, last name Cooper, first name I forget, and the governor of Kentucky, both Southern, both white male. Of course, with Kamala being from California, of course, they have their issues. And so that can be easily attacked. So that'd be very easy. Let me see, we've got another comment. This is not good because we cannot have folks not voting because they don't like either one of them. That's what's happening. And especially among your under 30s. All that being said is that obviously we've got a little runway, but not a lot. The Republican convention is next week. Democratic convention is shortly thereafter that. So we, of course, will have a lot more to say between now and then. We'll see what happens. We have a lot of drama and intrigue right now. So this is my take. You know, there's infighting within parties, factions within every party. No difference here. But I would say this. You've got to understand what your Constitution is, what's important to you. And sometimes, as my good friend Jimmy would say, you've got to hold your nose and pull the lever. But if you're going to get someplace, you've got to get organized. You've got to be disciplined. And someone who has a big gavel has to get everybody in line. Clearly, that's happening with the Republican Party. It ain't particularly happening with the Democratic Party. So we will keep this conversation open. We want to thank everybody for joining tonight. If you haven't done so, please make sure that you like, Of course, subscribe if you haven't, and then share this content with someone else. And most importantly, bring someone back next week. And of course, Jimmy, of course, will be back by then. And we're, of course, going to have another great show. So have a good evening. Have a good weekend. And of course, make sure you check on somebody who's been impacted by Beryl. We want to thank everyone this evening. And of course, good evening, everyone. Because if it is Wednesday night, it is definitely Black Men Speak. Good night.